I think this one's an artist. Ooh. Yeah, I think we've got ourselves a winner here. All right, I'm going in. Wish me luck. What do you mean you can't write with feathers? Wasn't the first pen made out of feathers? I think we can build our set over there. But we're running out of light. We need a new scene. Where's the writer? Oh, sure, now you need me. Well, it's too late. I'm too busy penning my next bestseller. That's okay. After reviewing all the dailies, I don't think we need a new scene. It's perfect just as it is. Well, I hate to be the voice of discontent, but I think this music could use some retooling, and I know just the guy. I'm not sure what I saw there, but man, that was punk rock. Okay, everybody, that's a wrap. Another shoot wrapped up before nap time. Good job, everybody. Make sure you turn in all your paperwork to the AD. And remember, it's always time to go indie now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the flagship show. I'm your host, Joe Compton, and I'm going to take you on a journey, so to speak, with this episode, as we have three very diverse artists who all had an inkling early on in their lives that they were destined for where they ended up. And that is something of an anomaly in most respects. They have had this inkling early in life, and they took a path to get there. And sometimes the path is winding and long, and sometimes it was always there and you just kind of diverted from it. That's the case with our three artists. You're going to meet MACKENZIE FLOHR, Richard Lynch, and Angela YURIKO Smith today. And they have different stories, but similar in the way that they came about who they became. So sit back and enjoy all of that. Plus we have OKUBO, Jason Greensides with some reviews, and Cassandra Penikoff is going to be by to give us what's trending on A Novel Connection. And a great, fun little short film. An interesting perspective on an old cliche. So we are going to enjoy all of that here, and let's get with the show. Talk about your long road from being this dreamer at such a young age to published author.
It all started when I was very young. My mom encouraged a lot of the creativity on my side of the family. They're all English teachers. So I had a lot of that same background of the English background there. And then my parents got me into the theater when I was a teenager. I went to the Beck Center of the Cultural Arts and did a lot of theater, got interested in script writing, just the behind the scenes. I did a lot of acting there as well. And then I realized I was more of the writer than anything else. So I did a lot of poems when I was a teenager and in college. And then once I got to being about 22, I'm like, I really think I want to write a book. Mm-hmm. One of my friends who published a couple years ago, she warned me, she goes, MACKENZIE, you're not going to do anything for the next 6 months other than market. And it's true. I was a bit naive of how difficult it is. It's one thing to actually start a story, but it's another thing to actually finish it. Mm. I can't even count how many rewrites I did of the first book of The Right of Wands.
When you started this journey, how did you define success, and how has, if it has, during it, changed in definition for you?
For me, these whole entire success is being able to get your name out there for the first part, so that you could even, if you could do an author takeover, like, oh yeah, I know MACKENZIE, or I actually found a very popular fantasy writer who's in indie world. We had gotten on Goodreads recently. He goes, "Where do I know you? I know your name somewhere, but I don't know where." I said, "Oh yeah, we're on Twitter together." He goes, "Oh, that's right. You're the person that has the wand, blah, blah, blah." I'm like, yes. So that's definitely it for me as an example of success, is that they could say, "MACKENZIE, writer wands." They're starting, I'm noticing now fans are starting to associate me with the wand, with the book, which is good.
Yeah, that's a good branding tool.
Yes.
What is your writing style? Are you a pantser, plotter? How do you like to write?
I'm actually a little bit of both. I did have an outline for the Writer Wands, but my main character, Murata, he's more of a directive character where I have to literally pants him off and figure out what he wants, because I'll go into a scene such as an example, he needs to find this book so that he'll be able to learn a spell. I have no idea other than what's going to happen in that chapter, other than he's going to find a book. Well, there might be something disaster that happens. He tells me, he dictates to me what's going to happen.
How did you find your publisher? Tell us that story.
That actually, I found them through an author that was at Wizard World Chicago back in 2015. Her name is Drea Damara, and she has written 3 books so far with BHC Press. She told me about them, and ironically, she had heard about my story about Matt Smith, this is the infamous wand, which he signed back in 2014. And she was so impressed by that story that she told her publisher about them, and she goes, "You know what? I really think you should contact them." So I submitted my book to them, and they were very impressed and said, "Hey, we're going to offer you a contract." So I have at least a 4-book series going that I produce a book once a year, and that's pretty much how it started. I was very fortunate.
Very cool. Did you query anybody before that, or was that your first foray?
That was actually my first foray. I was originally thinking about going traditional publishing until I realized that if I went traditional publishing, that the rights to the book could be lost. And if something like a TV series or a movie would be produced, I would have very little say to it. So that was very important to me, because I have a vision of how Murata and Orlin need to be, or the type of actors that need to play them. So that I wanted to make sure that I would be able to say, yes, this is what needs to be. This is a requirement.
I mean, how detailed are you in your world building? How much have you or will you share with your audience? Is there certain things you're keeping under wraps right now because you do have a four-book series planned? So, or is there things that you're releasing as the books go along? How are you approaching that process?
Yes, I am. There are certain things that I'm hiding. It's more about the characters. With the very first book, for example, you don't really get a good insight of how the character Anya is. You kind of understand that she's honestly like a witch, and that meaning is a very bad witch. And you just understand that you don't really understand her role, why she is the way she is. But as each book comes in, that you'll learn more about her. And there's some other characters too it looks like they are one way, but there's one character in particular who has a very interesting background that you get a little hint at the end of the first book that this character is not who he appears to be.
Being a screenwriter and theater person, I imagine that 3-act structure is big in your world, and so those little hints, that reminds me of something like you're setting up a sequel.
Yes, that was very important with me. I know a lot of people, there's some people who absolutely will not pick up a book simply because it has a cliffhanger, but I'm one of those that I want you to be able to say, "Oh my gosh, what's going to happen? I got to read that next book."
So in writing your first book, what do you think you've learned that you'll apply to future books going forward?
Honestly, not take so long as I did. I became sort of obsessed with rewrite, or I would get myself mentally stuck so that I couldn't do anything. And it was actually, I learned a lot about writing through Rachel Kane, who is a very popular fantasy writer, and she actually told me at Wizard World, she said, get this program called Write or Die, and that will stop you from obsessively redoing things over and over and over again. She's right.
How funny. That's awesome. I saw your eclectic playlist on your website. How do you use music when you write? Do you listen to it during, or is it something you listen to and then get into the writing? How are you approaching that when you have that music going on?
It will depend on the type of mood I'm in. For Murata, I actually use a song that is by Captain Hook that's on my playlist. I usually play that right before I start writing the character because he's got this amount of energy that I actually wrote the character for Matt Smith. So there's certain elements of Murata that's also in Matt. So I had to, he has a lot of energy. I do too. So I use that to usually just kind of get my energy going so that I can put it into the character and in my writing so it just kind of flows.
You've mentioned Matt Smith, and I noticed that a lot of how you describe your characters, you relate them to famous people. You're very visual about your characters relating to certain people. So do you have a trick, or is there something that you focused on specifically that allowed you to translate that overall visual effect into a writing form, a novel?
Yes, I would say, well, going back to Murata, the trick that I have, and it's funny, but it works. Most fans will probably be surprised by this. I was not a fan of Matt before I was writing the character for him. Before I met him in 2014, when I went to Wizard World, I'm like, oh yeah, this is really cool. I'm gonna get to meet a doctor because I'm a huge Whovian. But I honestly didn't really like his doctor because I really didn't understand how, from Tenet, how he could be kind of the doctor is so amo to this kind of like this 2-year-old with all this energy. So I really wasn't a fan of Matt. But I realized after meeting him that he was perfect. He was what I needed for Murata. So for me, as I prepared for him writing that character, I would look at some of Matt's older stuff just to get an idea of what kind of his capability was. And realizing as I wrote this character, really, I can take this character anyway or anywhere. And if I would be lucky enough to see Matt actually perform this character, I am 100% confident he would nail it.
What do you like about being indie? What does it mean to you to be indie?
It is nice because you get the freedom of being able to have, with my publisher, I get a say in my books. Yes, I am like other writers where you still have the editor that comes in and we're like, you know, this really is not working. You really need to rewrite this, or this is working good, but you need a little bit extra here to really expand on the story, which is what happened with my story. Orland, he had a lot of people will have a little bit of difficulty reading him because he does have a dialect, which I wrote on purpose. I actually based him off of Ian McGregor or David Tennant, and fans of David Tennant know that he has a very strong Scottish burr. And at least in the American audience, when he was in Grace Point, a lot of people said, oh, he's mumbling. He's mumbling. I'm like, he's not mumbling. So I ended up writing Orland similar to how in Transpotting, with which is a novel, the same dialect is found there where it's all phonetic. So it's all exaggerated. So he is very difficult to understand, but yet I have a guide in the beginning to say, hey, you know, this is how you can read his part. And then once you start getting used to it, it is a lot easier to do.
Yeah, you fought a long time to get where you are now. You've probably been through a lot of ups and downs, especially within the business of publishing and trying to get your writing seen. Where do you think it stops most people, and why do you think that is?
I think it's a combination, honestly, of two different things. I think part of it is people think that they can write this amazing book, it's going to be a bestseller, and realistically, that's not the case. Realistically, for an indie author, you are going to have an outside a job. You may even have a full-time job while you are writing until you get to that point where your writing does bring in enough money. And I really think that a lot of people think that they're going to be like the next J.K. Rowling or J.R.R. Martin, and it's just realistically, it's not that. I think also a part of it is having to do with the marketing, that people don't realize how difficult. You can write a book, and I've even found this for myself, that you'll have people that be like, oh, you wrote a book. That's great. Now what? Like, they really don't care. Oh, you wrote a book. Woo! Tell me something else. Even with editing, you can get very discouraged. Luckily, I was very fortunate where mine was just an issue I had to really expand, but I've had of other writers who have gotten a book and the editor comes back and they have to redo almost the entire book. And I can understand, having been obsessively written the book multiple times, how that can be discouraging, because you're like, well, how many more times I'm going to have to write this? Am I ever going to be finished with this book?
What's up, everybody? I am C. Pentecoff, fantasy author and owner and operator of A Novel Connection. Now, you guys might recognize me from GoIndieNow's This Week in Indies. Every week on that show, I tell you guys about my new releases on A Novel Connection. So I'm going to be joining the flagship show. This is my first one where I will be telling you guys about what's hot and trending on A Novel Connection currently. Okay, so the first one that we have is Losing a Piece of Me by KB Andrews. Their book one-liner is, all secrets come out eventually. I have a secret that chased me away from my home, my family, away from the only man I've ever loved. I took that secret and pushed it down inside of me, so far down that it never had a chance of coming out. That dirty little secret was like a seed that took root and grew to become a piece of me. But what happens when that secret has finally outgrown me? When its vines climb over every wall I have in place? When it finally overfills that little spot inside of me that has been buried in for so long now? All secrets come out eventually. I just hope mine doesn't destroy everyone I love. Now, this book is a romance book and a young adult book. It can be found at www.anovelconnection.com/losing a piece of me. Okay, our next book is coming from the sci-fi fantasy genre. It's also a romance book, and its subgenre is paranormal romance, okay? It's Trigger's Salvation by Crystal Miller. Okay, their book one-liner, losing her could mean losing myself. Here's their blurb. It says Trigger, which means that this is spoken from Trigger. When I saw Eve in the dress shop helping my sister, I knew there was more to her than meets the eye. I'd been completely unaware of their friendship, and now I need to do a little digging to make sure she doesn't pose a threat to my club. What will happen when she learns my secrets? Is she going to run, or is this incredible woman going to be my salvation? And now Eve, which means that this part is spoken from the perception of Eve. My first impression of Trigger was that he is a total douchebag. Only an asshole would treat a stranger the way he treated me. I have quite a history when it comes to assholes. After tricking me into what turns out to be an amazing apology dinner, I find myself going against my better judgment and falling for this man, whose moods I can never predict. I know he's hiding something. Can I put myself through this again? When his secrets come out, is it all going to come back to bite me? Okay, www.anovelconnection.com/triggersalvation. Go check it out. Now, this next book is coming at us from the erotica section. Okay, it's called Melissa's Men by Rebekah Jonesy. Their one-liner is, one wild woman, 5 willing men. Ooh. Melissa has always had a large appetite, more than one man can satisfy on his own. So she has never been able to stick with just one man. But when she runs into an old boyfriend and explains the reason she keeps leaving, he's willing and eager to help her get what she needs and to fulfill her fantasy. And she helps fulfill his fantasy with his friend. www.anovelconnection.com/melissasmen. Go check it out. Okay, our last hot and trending book is coming from the sci-fi fantasy genre. Its subgenre is young adult. Okay, it is called Dreamwalker, which you might recognize the title from last week's new books on This Week in Indies on GoIndieNow. Okay, but let me refresh your memory. Dreamwalker by Michelle Murray. One-liner is, enter the land of Mystica with Miranda. Okay, here's their blurb. In this first book, we learn the legend of the wizards. On the land of Mystica, there were once 6 wizards, 3 light and 3 dark. One day, one of the dark wizards, Midnight, set a spell to trap his fellow wizards so he could have Mystica all to himself. His spell backfired, and all of the wizards, including Midnight, were trapped in stones. Now Midnight has been freed. With the fellow wizards still trapped, he can finally complete his plan to take over Mystica. Midnight gathers an army and wreaks havoc and war throughout the land. Back on Earth, a college-age girl named Miranda starts having dreams of Mystica. She goes to an odd bookstore to help her sleep and finds out she is a dream walker. She travels to the world of Mystica. She must journey throughout the land, through ice caves, the forest of the lost, and the dragon caves to find and release the white wizard Lightning. Can this magical world be saved by one girl? Can she find and release the lightning in time to save Mystica? www.anovelconnection.com/dreamwalker. Guys, that's all the time I have today. So, yeah, go check out our new hot and trending books on A Novel Connection. You can go to www.anovelconnection.com/reader-connection. Don't forget to subscribe to A Novel Connection. We are the Netflix of books. For $1.99, you get access to all of either the young adult and adult books or all of the children's books, whichever you choose. Either way, you get unlimited downloads. Like I said, it's only $1.99 per month. Your first week is free. Okay? Don't pass up. www.anovelconnection.com/subscribe. And of course, don't forget to go indie now.
Hello everyone, this is Jin OKUBO for GoIndieNow. Joe, you gave us a really tough one this one. Well, you gave one tough one for me because I had a list of books that are on for review, and first of all, I'd like to say thank you to Clara Hembry for getting me involved in Audible, and hopefully my books will be able to come out later on this year into Audible. With Clara Hembry as the narrator, because her voice and the way she narrates the story was very, very wonderful. So family, and the book that I chose, which was from a list of 6 that that are waiting for reviews, is The Crows of Ticklewick by Faye Shone Danzie. And I'm very sorry for the cover here. The cover is not a good cover. I think the cover should be redone. But we get the cover, is not skin deep of the story. Let's see, The Crows of Ticklewick by Faye Shone by Clara Hembry there. Covers are only skin deep, and the story that's hidden in this cover is a gem. It's a diamond. It's perfect. If you want a good sit-down family story that you can read with your kids to teach good moral lessons or to reinforce how to be a good person, you'll get that out of this book. You'll get a good family environment out of this book. And unlike the newer stories that are based around animals and being all PC, this is not that way. This is more like the traditional animal stories, like Peter Rabbit, things like that. That's what this reminded me of, this story, like one of the classics. And it's written very, very well. It is told very, very well. And through Audible, it's narrated very, very well by Clara. I have it here on my Audible. I'm trying to figure out right now also how best to show covers, because my tablet died. This is not a tablet. This is actually my my Surface PC, and it doesn't have such a great screen on it because the surface is not made for that. So that's beside the point. This book, I recommend you should get it. The Crows of Ticklewick by Faizbone Danzie. Great family story. I read it, I think, in one sitting. Yeah, I read it in one sitting with Audible. I just flew right by it. It's a very nice short story. It'll be great, and I plan to read it to my son this year during Christmas time. Actually, that's how great of a story this is. It's something that I want to sit down and read out loud to him. So having the Audible is great. I'm planning on getting the book as well because it was such a great book. All right, that's it. Jin Okubo here. Please check out my books, Love, Kaoru and Love's Shadow, Brotherhood, Memories, and I'll see you guys later. Thank you again, Jin Okubo, for GoIndieNow. You guys have a good one.
So, Richard, how did this musical journey begin for you?
Well, I come from a country music background. By that, I mean my dad was an incredible singer, entertainer in the tri-state area, Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana. I grew up on an old farm, and every morning when I get up, Dad would be at the kitchen table drinking coffee, and he'd have that old country music there blasting in the kitchen, and I absolutely loved it. I got to be around that at a very early age, and knew that there was something really special. The first time I ever was on a stage, my dad, he was playing with a guy by the name of Porter Wagner, and Dad was the opening act for him in Dayton, Ohio. I was 8 years old, and that's the first time I got to go with my mom and dad to see my dad perform. And Dad was somewhere in the middle of the show, and he looked down to my mom and he said, "Get that boy up here and sing one with me." So I got up on the stage and I sang an old Buck Owens song, "I Got a Tiger by the Tail." And the response was pretty amazing, especially for an 8-year-old kid. And I was bit pretty early by that country music bug, you might say.
When did you pick up the guitar and start working, though, and figuring out that you could do this?
Well, back in middle school, I think I was 13 or so. I met up with some guys that I also had some interest in the music business, and taught me a few guitar chords. And so I was 13 when I started grabbing a guitar and getting really serious about it. And by the time I was 15, we were playing, Fridays and Saturday nights. Had a little band there in school that we were playing. And by the time I was 18, graduated high school, we were playing 3, 4, 5 nights a week all over the Cincinnati-Dayton area.
So your work is rooted in traditional twangs and steel guitars and 3 chords and the truth kind of philosophy, which is country's backbone. Why do you think you went that direction, especially given that you really started recording early in the 2000s?
Well, I seen where the modern country music was going, and they didn't really have a respect or an appreciation for what everybody in my lifetime has called country music. So I seen there was a real need for new music to be written and new music to be recorded that had that traditional great country music flavor. And now, more so now than ever, if you have an industry that doesn't respect its roots, typically you tend to lose a lot of interest in the folks that does respect it. And I'm kind of one of those folks, and I've had a whole bunch of success and a whole bunch of appreciation for the fact that I've kept my music traditional. And like I say, it's brand new music. It's being written quite often, and I involve myself with writing and other writers, but it's got that feel and that sound that you're familiar with, from the 70s, 80s, 90s. I just feel that there's a huge need for it.
Has working on a farm every day of your life, is there any similarity to making music in that respect? Have you learned something from that hard work and transitioned it into your music?
Oh, absolutely. I was born and raised on a farm. I still have a farm there in Waynesville, Ohio, where I live. The farming way of life taught you hard work, appreciation, dedication, respect, and it gave me a work ethic that I don't think I would have gotten just anywhere else in life. And and I mentioned my dad earlier. He really taught me so many things, about what your word is worth. So the country way of life is not only the music end of me, but it's actually my way of life all the way around. I bale hay and and we clean stalls and we raise a garden and there's just so much that I love about the country way of life. I never not being in or around that lifestyle.
How many shows a year do you do at the Keepin' It Country Farm? And tell people what the Keepin' It Country Farm is.
Well, I'm glad you asked that. The Keepin' It Country Farm is the name of the barn, or actually the name of our farm where we live there in Waynesville, Ohio. And I built a massive big barn there on our farm. And we 3 or 4 times a year, we'll bring national acts to come in and perform along with us. Like last year, we had Confederate Railroad, we had Ronnie McDowell, we had Buddy Jewell. It's an amazing, amazing facility, and not because it's mine, but when you come up to the farm, you're out in an agricultural rural area, and you walk into this big old barn, and you see it's built like an old barn. It's got the wood siding and the barn is just about as big a draw, and the farming way of life and the way it's laid out there in agricultural area, the farm and the barn is almost as big a draw as the music itself. So it's really an amazing facility. We do way over 100 dates a year, every year, all around the country. And so it's really nice to be around some of these folks that I've performed with, and they've been my heroes for years and years and years, and now I'm getting to perform with them and be part of their shows, and they're part of mine. It's pretty gratifying.
What's some things that they've taught you about the business that you appreciate?
There's that dedication. They haven't lost their roots. I learned at a young age that you can only be what you are. I couldn't sing Vince Gill if I wanted to. I love Vince Gill, but you got to come to terms with yourself. If you're a traditional artist and you try to do something you're not, typically it shows. So I've learned just to be me, and I've learned to appreciate the fact that there's millions and millions of folks out there wanting to hear that traditional music, and so that's pretty much what I've learned. And being around those great artists are proof positive in my mind, because they're still selling out venues, and they're still bringing out all these folks spending their money to come see them. And so I think I've learned a lot from those folks.
You've done things pretty much the independent route. What do you like about being independent?
Well, what's really great about it is that I'm not being recorded and put up on a shelf somewhere. Unfortunately, a lot of folks that want to have the record label, they do have the success of being signed to a label, and unfortunately they are owned, and until the management or the label decides that they want to do something with them, their music just lays there on a shelf. And I really don't have any interest in doing that. I've reached the success that we are having, basically me and my wife and our management team, just making sure that we play our music. So if we sign to a label, it would have to be something that would propel and make sure that we don't ever get shelved. and I think, I'm not sure I'm explaining myself exactly right, but if you're owned by a label, you have very limited access to where you can play and where your music's being performed at. So I definitely want to keep control of all that.
What's the recording process like for you? What do you enjoy about it?
Well, it's an absolute blast to be around in that studio, especially in the music portion of it. In the very beginning, I'm fortunate enough to be part of all aspects of the recording in my life now, my career, and to be around some of these musicians that are far superior to anybody. The musicians on our album are second to none. These guys, they play their tails off. And therefore it makes me a better musician because, you know, I got to step up my game. If these guys are working like they're doing, I got to make sure I do my part. So I love the fact that I can be around, you know, these incredible musicians that make my music, you know, what it is. And, you know, being in the studio itself, see as a young person how it would intimidate you. I've been in the studio. This is my third national recording. So doing pretty well with it, but I'm always learning. And I always want to make sure that, you know, I continue to learn and get better at what I do. And if you surround yourself with great musicians and great folks that know their industry, I don't think you can help but get better yourself.
Your new album is enjoying some success, having just come out. But what's one thing about success that you'll never get used to?
Well, you know, sometimes the folks that I've known all my life, I'm noticing they kind of treat me a little different. I'm like, you know, I'm still the same guy that bales hay, and I come down here and eat at lunchtime, and you know, I got dirt on my boots, and so sometimes I sense that some folks treat me a little differently, and it's usually the folks I've known a long time, and not all. A lady recently said, "Richard, you're a big star. You're never going to come back around anymore." I said, "Well, first of all, I'm not a big star. I just do what I do. I love the music, and you know, whatever success level I get to, ultimately, I really believe that you know, I'm rooted enough to where I'm just Richard. I don't put on any airs. I don't try to be something I'm not. But I am noticing some folks are treating me just a little bit differently than they did just a few years ago."
This is ML Spencer, and I'm here to read to you an excerpt from my novel, Darklands. That's this novel right here, Darklands. That's it? Yeah. Alright, so here we go. This is a little reading from chapter 1. Let's see if I can pull this off. This is impossible, Azar managed at last. The man you speak of is dead. As am I, the Prime Warden reminded her with a shrug and a smile. Spreading his hands, he went on to explain, Darian Lachlan committed his soul to the service of Xeris. He is now one with us in purpose. He has assumed all rights, responsibilities, and covenants of the servant he replaces. So Darian is, in every respect, the overlord your people have been so long awaiting. Your request is his singular purpose to fulfill. Azar turned her head and spat upon the ground. Whirling away, she exclaimed in anger, I will not suffer the company of this man. He is not even a man. He is a demon, a monster. Perhaps. The ancient Prime Warden raised his eyebrows. He did not appear affronted in the least by Azar's accusation. But I would strongly advise you to reconsider and think very carefully before declining Darian's assistance, because, considering the nature of your demands, it sounds like a monster is exactly what you need. Azar gazed at him with dread in her eyes, knowing deep down in her gut that Rehnquist's assessment was probably accurate. She sighed, giving in, heart heavy with dismay. Go with her, Xavier Rehnquist commanded his newest servant in a voice suffused with arrogance and ice. You heard her demands. Go forth and fulfill them. The dark-haired demon nodded slightly. I will do my best, Prime Warden. His voice sounded terse, strained. He strode forward. Stop. Rehnquist's sharp command halted him in his tracks. As Azar looked on in fascination, Darian Lachlan turned back around with weary patience in his eyes. Xavier Rehnquist promised him, "Your best isn't going to be good enough. Instead of your best, I demand your worst. You must let go of your past and embrace your destiny. Unchain your inner demons. Conquer your own ghosts, just as you once conquered my armies. Transcend the constraints you have used to shackle your conscience, and experience firsthand what true freedom feels like." Darian Lachlan nodded, dark strands of hair swaying forward into his face. "It shall be as you ask, Primordial. It had better be, for your sake, and for hers." So, that was it. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Kay Gantus from Author Assist, and I'm reading on behalf of the author Mary Crawford from her latest new release, Pieces. It's not fair. You promised to marry me, and now you're going to embarrass me in front of all my friends. I have potential clients out there in the audience today. This is going to make me look terrible. How do you expect me to explain this? How about admitting that you are a controlling asshole, that your fiancée is concerned enough that she doesn't want to marry you? Very funny. Most people can handle what I dish out. Just because you're weak doesn't make me wrong. Trust me, no one should have to deal with what you dish out, least of all your spouse. So this woman is not going to be your wife. But I thought you loved me, he whines. I thought I did too. However, it seems I'd fallen in love with some idolised model of a guy I wish you were instead of the person you really are. And I don't much like the person you actually are, and I'm not going to marry you. And you have belittled every choice I make in life. As I recently learned, life is far too short to live with regrets. If I married you, it would be the biggest regret of my life. That's not fair. I sprung for all the best restaurants, the parties, vacations. I treated you like a princess. You should be grateful. Perhaps you should spend a little less money and spend a little more time on your personality and the way you treat people. So help me God, if you don't walk down that aisle with me, there's going to be some serious repercussions, he threatens. It suddenly dawns on me that I'm not that person who's different today. I sure as heck don't recognise a person screaming at me from the other side of the door. I wonder whatever happened to that charming, debonair guy I met. I am Kay Gantus from Author Assist. Thank you for watching.
Chapter 1. Starflight. Evelyn was a state-of-the-art artificial intelligence system designed and built specifically to provide oversight aboard the Miranda II colony ship. To call her a mere computer was to do her creators injustice. Her entire consciousness was spread over 20 distributed processor cores and miles of cables, sensors, and feedback units. With such a vast array of processing power at her disposal, she could perform calculations and compare scenario outcomes with speeds that far exceeded the average computer. There were multiple backups of her personality matrix, as well as a multitude of redundancies built into her core systems. In fact, Evelyn had been created that way so she could serve throughout the Miranda II's 20-year journey from Earth to Carmen Delta 3. Her job so far had consisted of examining reports from subsidiary computer systems, formulating action plans for those systems, and overseeing the successful arrival at their destination. At a glance, her responsibilities might seem mundane, but every decision she had made had to happen in mere picoseconds. Any failure to reach a rapid conclusion and recommendation could result in a tragedy beyond measure. Alongside measuring the systems of the Miranda II, Evelyn also monitored the life signs of over 2,000 hibernating colonists, a power system output that outstripped the average city, and a hyperdrive that propelled the ships at speeds. exceeding that of light. Once these kinds of speeds had been considered impossible, but before the outbreak of war, scientists had cracked the problems behind moving a ship into and out of hyperspace, and it was those systems that had been among the most experimental technologies installed on the Miranda II. A signal came from the navigation computer letting Evelyn know that they were approaching the outskirts of Carmen 3 planetary system. Evelyn ordered the shutdown of the hyperdrive engines. Since the deceleration from 120% of light speed would rip most ships apart, she also activated the inertial dampeners, allowing them to handle the excess forces. Every decision that Evelyn made from this point forward carried unknown risks, because the Miranda II had launched at short notice. A series of nuclear detonations in Earth's lower atmosphere had preceded the outbreak of yet another war over dwindling resources. As a result, her creators had rushed the departure of their second attempt at establishing a remote colony, leaving an unknown number of systems unfinished. The Miranda II was launched before final testing of her systems had been completed, and Evelyn had only limited repair options without human intervention. Evelyn was performing a quick review of the ship's performance when a jolt rocked the Miranda II as she crossed the threshold of light speed and re-entered sublight space. In the process, several of the craft's hull plates stretched a few microns, and Evelyn ordered the structural stability assessment from the onboard engineering computer. The results were not encouraging.
Hello, this is Tori Gates, author of the new book, Live from the Cafe. Chapter 1. The Strangest Place on Earth. The late model BMW turned off the Trans-Canada Highway, down the sharp curve of the ramp, and into a world its driver did not expect. From the manicured landscape that bordered the asphalt rail, there now came a more rustic encroachment. Shadows passed over and above the motorist. He hadn't paid attention until he realized his GPS had gone dark. At that same moment, he noted the caller on the other end of his smartphone wasn't there. There was no line to go dead, but the man was suddenly alone. Must be a gap, he thought, as he pulled up to the weathered stop sign in both English and French. The two-lane road before him showed the only way to go, right. An equally run-down sign and an arrow directed him to the next town, Harlansville. He'd never been here before. Somehow this exit eluded him for the past 25 years. With the arrival of spring, the trees had begun life once more, and they shaded the way down this rough potholed road. So much so his dashboard panel glowed as if at night. From the bright sunlight of the highway to now, this was a little disconcerting. But it appeared to be a straight in-and-out road. Turning around shouldn't be an issue. He checked his phone. Still no service, and he didn't see any towers in the vicinity. The GPS was still out. At least the stereo worked. CBC Radio 1 was clear, but the discussion seemed faded into the ether. Soon, a river presented itself on his left, far down an incline and running as a parallel valley. Trees lined the banks on either side of this. Partially hidden on the upper horizon, he saw the relic of an abandoned mill. Green and brown hills rose up to the right, and he saw houses, old homes built in the last century for sure. Haphazard they were along that hill, and then on a ridge of sorts meters above these. They peered downward, leaned out, and threatened to swoop upon him. He looked ahead. Here now came a street, its white and yellow lines faded. Along the sides were parked cars, trucks, and an occasional SUV. More houses on either side. All looked old, and most needed a paint job and fixing up. There were no lawns. The front doors mostly stepped off from inside porches to sidewalks. He approached an intersection. One traffic light blinked, and above him the sun once more shone. On the lower left corner was a block of small businesses, among them a Chinese takeout joint. The upper left corner hosted a Petro-Canada station, and across the street a small garage. The one directly across from the restaurant, however, caught his eye. He expertly slid the Beamer into an open spot right before the curve. He got out and shivered in his suit jacket. The chill of winter past was still around, and he looked about. A handful of vehicles passed, and he watched people walking or biking on their way to somewhere. No one seemed to pay attention to this well-dressed stranger. Briefcase in hand, he locked his car and stared at the dark brick of this ramshackle structure. In brown and green, the sign above the imposing wooden door merely heralded Le Café. My thanks to Joe Compton for having me on. Once again, Live from the Cafe is available at sunburypressstore.com and also Amazon and other fine online retailers. Thank you very much.
Alana's stomach clenched as she climbed the steps to the hidden entrance into the Temple of Whispers. The journey through the tunnels had unnerved her. Something about the way the eerie wind broke the dead silence brought to mind an image of walking through the Longkeeper's halls. She half expected eyeless, rotting corpses to leap out at her. Yet the hardest part lay ahead. She had only her memory and Graham's code to navigate the maze of the Secret Keeper's temple. One wrong turn and she'd wander forever. Delay too long and she'd have no choice but to flee Varamis empty-handed. With the bloody handout for their heads, she had one chance to get what she'd come for. Not for the first time tonight, she regretted leaving Alan in Pramis. His flawless memory would come in handy in the twisting maze of the Temple of Whispers. He'd have retraced their steps to the workroom with ease. The thought of entering the temple alone left her mouth dry and her palms sweaty. She'd need to be on full alert to spot the Secret Keepers before they spotted her. If only I had another pair of eyes. Willa would be the perfect partner. The hawk's ability to move silently rivaled any serpent or hound. It would be nice to have someone I could trust at my back for this bit. She pushed the thought aside. Lem had his own duties to attend to. She had to get in and out with haste. Eric would be waiting for her at the south gate 2 hours before dawn. Not a bloody lot of time, but it'll have to do. Taking a deep breath, she drew out the little hawk figurine. She'd stolen it for Coden's first name day. His fingers had worn away most of the detail, but the solid feel of the wood stilled the slight tremor in her hand. For my little hawk. She pressed the hidden trigger. The door slid open without a sound, and Alana stepped into the pale, cold tunnels in the bowels of the Temple of Whispers. Graham's final words of warning echoed in her mind. Leave no trace of your presence. The Secret Keepers will notice even the slightest thing out of place. Alana tugged on her gloves, tightened the straps on her leather vest, and checked her gear one last time before slipping down the dimly lit corridor.
This is Seal Cannon from Fiction Atlas Author Services. Well, actually, it's Fiction Atlas Press now because I got an LLC, and Chasing Firefly is the first book that I have been able to publish with my publishing company, so yay! And I'm also a contributing author.
Hi guys, this is AC Jade. I'm going to read my short story called One Night Chance.
Hello, my name is Janae Keys, and I'm one of the authors in the summer romance anthology Chasing Fireflies. My story is called The Summer Affair.
Hi there, I'm Diane Morrison. I'm one of the authors in the Chasing Fireflies summer romance anthology, and I'm reading an excerpt from my story, The Eye of the Storm.
Hi, my name is Sarah Berman. I am the author of a whole passel of things, including Scarborough Fair, which is in Chasing Fireflies.
The closer the end of their junior year got, the more adults seemed to spring up with opinions about what they would do for the rest of their lives. At 17, thinking of more than sex and food seemed a little daunting. How are they supposed to know where they would be in 15 years when next week seemed just as far away? Mom wants me to go into nursing, and Dad wants me to join him at the advertising firm. And has anyone asked you what you want to do? I don't know. Law, maybe? Her voice was a little unsure, but there was a hopefulness to it that intrigued Kyle. Oh yes, that's perfect. Arguing with people all day. It was practically made for you, he teased. Gee, thanks for your vote of confidence. She shot him a look of disdain, but he could see the smile forming at the corner of her lips. Anytime.
After an hour of tossing and turning, I got up Unable to sleep, I slowly walked to the front door to see if he was still outside. I felt guilty. I felt like I was responsible for his safety now. I opened the door to check on him, but he wasn't there. "Can't sleep?" he whispered against my neck and grabbed my waist as he entered my trailer. "Don't you dare do it again," I whispered back. He held my waist in a vice grip, backing me against the wall as I tried to keep calm. His presence was demanding, yet safe. His eyes told me that the next move was up to me.
I sprinkled paprika on top of the eggs and took the tray in my hands before strolling outside. The day was incredibly warm, definitely a day for a barbecue. More guests were arriving, and as I sat the tray down before I was motioned over by Joseph, I did it as expected. I stood at his side as his doting wife while others arrived and we greeted them. Finally, my guest arrived. Kyle entered our backyard with a grin from the moment he spotted me. He shook Joseph's hand and introduced himself before giving me a friendly hug. Just from his touch on my skin, I craved what we had together. And the last few weeks had been mind-blowing. While Joseph was at work and Trisha at preschool, I was with Kyle. We practically locked ourselves into his condo and refused to leave until I absolutely had to. It wasn't just the sex, but the instant connection we had. Every moment made it feel like I knew him for years. We were so much alike and had the same passions. "Ash says you're a writer too," Joseph mentioned before taking a swig of his beer. Yes, I am. Sci-fi," Kyle said proudly. "Yeah, you wrote that one Alien movie. That shit was bomb," Joseph said, at least singing Kyle's praises. That was worth something, I suppose. "But for real, it's not a job, though. You just hang out and type shit. That's all Ash does." Kyle looked at Joseph as if he had called his mom a whore or something just as insane. I could see in his eyes he was trying to formulate an answer that didn't involve punching Joseph in the face.
He awoke with a start, his heart racing and his body drenched with sweat. His first thought was, "Where am I?" His second, "Who am I?" And finally, "What have I done?" He slapped palms to face, sighing in relief when his hands, his clawed, green hands, found bristled scruff. Not yet, thank the gods. He eased back into the pillows now that his disorientation was passing. Beside him, his beautiful new wife slept, undisturbed. His breath caught in his throat. His wife. Her auburn hair, radiant red in the sunbeam that poured through a slim crack in the curtains, flowed over velvet pillows like a molten river. Nature's warning sign, he mused with a fond smile. His eyes traced the contours of her remarkable curves, sadly still covered by the sheets, except for a jade green shoulder, and a strong, graceful arm lying over and around the swell of an ample breast. Her high, clear brow creased in her sleep, and the corners of her full red lips, lush as a tropical flower, folded around her sharp ivory tusks.
The muted roar of Scarborough Fair traveled across the rolling hills and through the dense forests for a full half-day's walk. Geese, sheep, pigs, horses, and cows contributed just a portion of the loud murmur. Children ran through the stalls, screeching and giggling as they chased chickens and each other. They would quiet for a while if you gave them a treat to stuff whole into their wide mouths with hands dirtied from scrambling through the mud. Above it all, the deep booming voices of barter rang out from various vendors, punctuated by occasional outrage at thieving orphans and street rats. Brennan ignored the animals and the children and the vendors. She dismissed the raucous laughter, cries at a brawl, brags and grunts in equal measure at the strength contests. The peasant men had little to talk about except crops and politics, neither of which interested Brennan. She did, however, listen to small snatches of women's gossip, deaths, births, marriages, and political maneuvering. The way women talked, she felt sure she would hear of any and every important occurrence in the land, and some from beyond.
I really hope that you will pick up this book, and there's 8 other authors, and they're from all genres. There's fantasy, there's speculative fiction, there's erotica, there's contemporary romance, there's interracial romance, it's like a potluck, people.
Amant de Pont-Neuf. That's the 1991 film by Leo Carax, a French independent filmmaker who might be thematically and visually somewhere between Lars von Trier and Jean-Luc Godard. But his 1991 film, Les Amants de Pont-Neuf, Lovers on the Ninth Bridge, it stars Juliette Binoche and Denis Lavant, and she's a painter who goes on the streets because she's suffering from a degenerative disease, and the Denis Lavant character, he's already homeless. And anyway, it's about their relationship on the streets, how love is impossible on the streets. And it's just such a brilliantly, visually interesting, beautiful film. There's one key scene in there which just sums up just how magical and brilliant it is. It's when they basically get drunk. The two characters get drunk, and it's just so brilliantly interesting and uplifting and amazing. It's a film I highly recommend. It's been an influence on me when I was writing The Distant Sound of Violence. You know, Nathan on the streets, you know, this film was in the back of my mind, how love is impossible on the streets. And so please, if you saw Holy Motors, that's his most recent film. It's the one that starred Kylie Minogue. It's an art film, but she breaks out in song halfway. If you like that film, then go back to his Leo Carax's 1991 film, Les Amants de Pont-Neuf. It's absolutely superb, and I highly recommend it. Thanks for listening.
So, Angela, you've committed your better part to a better part of your life to the craft of writing. You started really young,
I have.
exploring multiple genres. Why do you think writing spoke to you so loudly?
I think writing speaks to a lot of us that have had trauma in our lives, and one of my big soapboxes is writing as therapy, because that was my release. When bad things happen and I couldn't talk to anybody about them, I would write them. And you still get the emotional release of having told a secret, but one that you can't really, especially if you label it fiction, you can't really get any repercussions from. So it's kept me from suicide. I have a book called a story called When I Committed Suicide in Mr. Bonejangles. And that was really, I was out of here, I was done, and I thought I'll just write it out first, and it turned into a comedy because I was so bad I couldn't even commit suicide right in the story. And then afterwards I had this thing, this was after my first divorce, that's my disclaimer, I had every right, but afterwards I had this thing that was of value to me, and it just kind of offset the whole, and I've used it repeatedly. You know, when I've just really had hard times with somebody, I write it out, I kill them fictionally, feel so much better afterwards, and they can keep pulling their crap, but I'm perfectly happy imagining what really happened to them in my imagination. So I think that's why I started in second grade, and the first story I wrote was about, it was a ghost story, and it was about a man who kept hearing babies crying in a house that he moved into. And it turns out that somebody had been killing babies. I know I was a second grader. I didn't know the real horrors of that. And he was stuffing them in the walls. And so when this man moved in, he was hearing all the voices, and it made him mad. And then he went insane and started tearing the house down with his bare hands and found all the baby skulls. That was my first story in second grade. And no wonder the teachers thought there was something wrong with me.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, you got a little telltale heart there.
Yeah, Mrs. Cole, Mrs. Whitmore, I'm sorry I held a grudge for so long. I do get it now.
Is your process different when you're going between different genres, like, for example, going from nonfiction to fiction, or children's book to adult horror, or is it more just about the content approach that's different than the writing process itself?
The process doesn't change. When I'm writing, it's very much almost a subconscious flow of thought kind of thing, and I've often equated it to maybe like playing with the Ouija board, and you're not really there, you're just channeling, and not that, you know, I do that, but that's what it feels like. I'm channeling something from somewhere else. And then whenever I don't know information, when I'm doing nonfiction, I know what information needs to go there. I just don't know what it is yet. So I just X. And then after I'm done, after the flow is kind of spent itself, then I go back and I Google and research, and sometimes it changes because I go, wow, I didn't even know that. I have to fill in all this other information. And when I'm doing fiction, it's pretty much the same thing. I kind of believe that fiction and nonfiction are the same thing. Just the nonfiction, you kind of have to zazz up a little bit, or it can be boring. And the fiction, you have to put the reality, the basis of truth in there as a foundation. Otherwise, it's just going to fling off into outer space and not be believable.
Is research a real big part of your process?
It is, and even that kind of goes off the cuff, because I'll find myself going, especially, with Google and everything, I'll just start meandering down a path. I may have started out looking at paranormal, ghost hunting tools, and then suddenly I'm down here on, the Kyoto house in Okinawa and the stuff that happened there, and then indigo children who have, are changing the world because of their supernatural ability. It just can go all over the place. And then the neat thing about writing is it all goes in there, and it's kind of kept in like some kind of subconscious file, and eventually it'll pop out, and all of a sudden it'll be like, oh, that's perfect, because that ties in with this that I read like 2 years ago, and now it's a story.
You kind of let your characters dictate to you then how the story is going to play out, it sounds like.
I do, and I think that's a little bit of a selfish thing, because then I also get to enjoy it. I'm not a control freak. I really love to see where it's going to go, and so even in End of May, my first book, it just kind of went along on its own, and half the time people would say, well, what's it about? I don't know. I mean, they're kind of deciding right now what it's about. And then I wound up writing 15,000 more words for it after it was published. And this whole new character came in that it wound up being like kind of an autobiographical me as a young child. And I'm thinking, what the heck? And when I read it, I'm almost a little embarrassed because it's so much me as a child that it feels like telling secrets, but it is fiction. It's all fiction. Officially.
You just released a new book. I mean, you have a fair amount of titles under your name. Let's just put it that way. And I mean, are you seeing your own personal evolution as a writer? And how did you become aware of it, if you have?
I am, and it actually started when of course, you published your first book, and I remember I was in Australia, and I was walking down the road, and I know that people can't look at me and see the difference. But I felt like there was such a big difference because I had this book with my name on it. Oh my gosh, I am a different person. This is a lifelong dream. And so even though I knew logically not to expect any kind of change, I still emotionally expected that. And then none happened, of course. You kind of be like, I published, and it just disappears in the universe. But I was lucky because I used to do Journal Stone with Amy I, and we were talk show hosts, I guess, on that. And one of our interviews came through, and they were talking about what a big overnight success she was. She was just amazing. I wish I could remember her name. But as she was talking, she said, oh, I know that everybody's talking about what an overnight success I am, but I've actually been plugging away at this for about 5 years, and I'm just now getting noticed. And it kind of went off like a light bulb to me that, oh, this is the long haul. I am not going to be noticed after 1 or 2 books. In 1 or 2 books, I'm still a flash in the pan, and the development as well. Because I look back at that first book, and I don't know how many people now I say, oh, don't buy End of May. I'm completely rewriting it. It was crap. It was my first book. So I think that was the moment where I thought, well, this is what I do. Even if indie publish hadn't happened, indie publishing, I would still be writing, just not getting published probably because it's such a long shot the way it was. And I would just have reams and reams and reams of stacks of paper, and hopefully when I die, my children would find it, and then I'd be a sensation. Woo! After I can't care about it anymore, unless come back as a ghost. So that made a difference to me because it took off that panicked edge of nobody's noticing me. I have to get noticed. I have to. And I could just settle down and go, well, what I need to do is produce.
The art of the short story is almost a rite of passage for a horror writer. I mean, that's
Mhm.
where most horror writers fall in love with the horror genre. I mean, with Poe and Lovecraft, and there's several others. How do you think that discipline makes you a better writer? And do you think it's an important thing for a horror writer or any writer to embrace and try, because it helps the craft?
I do. I really do. I think as writers, we tend to get caught up in word count, and I just absolutely am not a believer in word count. I really believe that every story knows how long it should be.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them may be 100,000 words, especially in dark fantasy. My husband just wrote a 100,000-word book, so to show me up, make me feel bad. I tend to do shorter stuff, but we're still married. It's okay. We'll get through it. But I think the short story, fits our culture now because it's so quick to read. You can be on a bus, be on a plane, you've got, 20 minutes on your lunch hour, you can read a short story and get that whole satisfaction of begin, middle, and end. And I also think it teaches us discipline, if we are used to writing bigger pieces, to distill the story into exactly the essentials that need to be there.
What do you like about being indie?
The control, honestly. I know I say I'm not a control freak, but I am when it comes to myself. I just don't like the responsibility of controlling other people. But it is good, like the first book that I had for poetry, my first poetry collection, I didn't consider myself a poet. I had a really bad experience with it in high school, so I kind of kept it in the closet. Like, yes, I write poetry, but I don't talk about it. And I had started going to open mics because of the performance anxiety issues, speaking to people, learning how to project their voice. And so I was writing poetry for that, really, so I would have something to read. And then last November, it was my birthday. And, what do I want to do for my birthday? I want to publish something. And I had just done a book, because I do book layout, and I had just done a book for somebody as a gift for his 80th birthday. And I thought, you know what, I'll just put some of these poems, down, and I'll just publish a poetry book, and nobody will ever notice. And hey, they're out of my way. I can delete them out of my computer, and I can, get the extra space back. And it did just shockingly well, because, probably my poet friends are going to say, I can't believe you said that, but who reads poetry? This was my thought. I do, but I'm weird. So that did really, really well. And I thought, dang, if I had done that at the right time, because the award season, you kind of have to publish at the beginning of the year, so you have all year to promote it and get it out there. So you can be spontaneous and say, I'm going to publish a book tonight on this,
Did you ever entertain or even attempt at traditional publishing?
I did. Originally, I did get into, no, it was Mr. Bonejangles got picked up by a traditional publisher, and I almost instantly regretted it. It was the loss of control, just the waiting and waiting. At first, it was very exciting. I got to sign a contract. I took a picture of myself. Look, this is me. This is the pin that I signed the contract with. And I was just really, really stoked with myself because I felt like it was a justification of my worth as a writer. Yeah. But then, it's the waiting, and then it finally came out, and there was some issue with that, and an old version had gotten published instead of the new version with corrections or something, and it just really was, I didn't like that lag, and of course, at the time, I didn't have that many books out, so each one was precious to me, and not that each one isn't precious now, but it's kind of like, more like, well, you can have these three, because I'm doing something over here, which is why I think I could go hybrid now.
Does a story ever really stick with you after it's complete, or have you been able to walk away and not have that happen?
No, some do. When I'm writing it on purpose for a goal, a lot of times, like The Braid. When I wrote The Braid, I was trying to that's when I first accepted this horror part of me, but I'm not getting rid of it, because I tried. And The Braid was my first attempt to, on purpose, write a traditional horror story. And I did, and it's never stuck with me. But End of May was a completely different story. That was very much one of those kind of channeling experiences. And I stopped. After about a year into it, I had to stop because the character, the evil character, Halil, Halil, see, I can't even talk about him without choking up. Halil, I would smoke every night, just 1 or 2 cigarettes out on the balcony. It was kind of like my, okay, the day is done, relax. and I would be smoking my cigarette, and I would hear like a little grind or something around the corner, and in my mind suddenly it was him. He's standing around the corner, he's watching me, these things are happening, and I started thinking, I think I'm going crazy, because I know he's not real, but I'm experiencing him like he's real. So I had to take a break from the whole book for a while.
What do you think we can learn from ghosts?
Oh, just who knows? Let me get my Ouija board out and we'll find out.
One thing's for sure, even being a prodigy, you wouldn't be able to get anywhere without the love of friends and family. Hence why I'm saying goodbye to you here today on my vacation. My wife and all of my family have been super supportive in allowing me to do what I do, as have all of you. And I want to thank you so much for being a part of our show, as always. And thanks to Mackenzie FLOHR, Richard Lynch, and Angela YURIKO Smith for being part of our show as well. And of course, Mr. Jin OKUBO, Jason Greensides, and our newest member, Cassandra Pentikoff, for always giving us what we need when we do what we do. And that is, it's always time to go indie now. All right, stick around for the great short film coming up, and we'll see you next time, everybody. Have a good one.
Hi, I'm Vince Salerno. I am the director of Sugar, the short film. When we first got the script, the assignment was to make it unique in our own special way. I didn't have a specific style down at that point, so I thought what would be a creative way to shoot it. So I met with my DP, Austin Jacobson, and I decided that we were going to shoot it as a POV, the whole thing from the main character's perspective, and that would play into the reveal at the end, which I will not spoil for those of you who have not seen this short yet, but everything everything we do in this happens for a reason. So once you watch the short all the way till the end, you'll understand why we shot it the way we shot it. But yeah, that's a little fun fact. Hope you guys enjoy the short.
Come in.
Hello?
Sorry, I thought you were someone else. Come in.
Hi, I'm Taylor. I just moved in across the hall, 202.
Taylor. I'm Mark. So, what can I do for you?
Right, sorry. I was wondering if you had a cup of sugar?
Seriously?
Yeah.
Well, where are you from?
Nebraska. I just moved in a couple days ago.
Oh, it all makes sense now.
What makes sense?
It's just that, well, people don't usually ask to borrow sugar around here.
Oh, sorry. I can leave.
No. I think I have some sugar around here somewhere. Let me just go look. Make yourself at home. Oh, sorry.
Nice place you got here.
Thanks. I'm sorry it's so messy. I wasn't expecting company.
I thought you said you were.
Right. No, I was actually just waiting on my friend, Damon. He doesn't count.
Gotcha. Okay, I just thought, I don't know, maybe it was like your girlfriend or something.
Who, me? No. Not me. I don't have a girlfriend. Nope. Not me. I'm as single as they come. Not that there's anything wrong with not being single. I'm saying that I can do who I want. I meant, I can,
It's okay. You're good.
So, are you single? I'm sorry, that was rude. Gosh, I'm babbling now. God, I suck at this.
Well, I'm gonna get going. But thanks for the sugar.
Anytime. Enjoy the sugar. Sugar?
Thanks again. And Mark,
Yeah?
I'll see you around.
Right. Yeah.
Mothership, this is Marquis.
We read you. What is it?
Communicating with humans is just... it's way too difficult. Especially when they're so... lovely.
Well, no one else is good enough to do the job. Just a couple more days and our study of the humans will be over.
Mark? This isn't a full cup of sugar.